means a model child or perfect. But back when I was a teenager and living with my parents, I used to always sneak out of the house. I lived in a small, boring town that was actually kind of depressing. And one way that I would have fun and live a little was to break the rules and sneak out. Well, in this story, I was planning on sneaking out to meet my friend Rachel, who lived in the same neighborhood as me. I snuck out my bedroom window, which was on the first floor. It was really late at this point, like 2 in the morning, because that was the only way I knew my parents were asleep and wouldn't find me. I was walking down our sidewalk, the only lights coming from some of the streetlights. I was 2 minutes into my walk to meet Rachel when I noticed this man. I couldn't see his face because he had his hood up. He was walking on the other sidewalk and in the other direction. This was the first time I had ever seen someone else out walking while I snuck out. It kind of threw me off, but then I noticed that he was looking at me. I tried to pretend I didn't see it and walked a bit faster. I finally met up with Rachel in the cul-de-sac in our neighborhood. I was just glad to see her and to be away from that guy. Rachel and I smoked cigarettes and vaped. This was also my rebellious spirit, besides sneaking out. When we finished the cigarettes, we said goodbye and planned on meeting up again in a few nights. As I was walking back home, I noticed that man in the hoodie again. He was standing directly under the lamplights and not even hiding the fact that he was staring at me. I noticed that he was also starting to walk in my direction. I was terrified because I did not want him to know where I lived, so I started running. I ran past my house so he wouldn't know it was mine. I ran into a neighbor's backyard and hid behind their shed for like 20 minutes. I scanned the sidewalk from there and thought I had lost the guy. I cut across the backyards until I made it to my own. I was about to climb back into my window when I saw him. He was standing at the side of my neighbor's house, watching me. Then he started running at me. I quickly pulled myself in and shut the window. I locked it and looked up, only to be staring face to face with this guy. I did everything in my power not to scream. Instead, I shut my blinds. I hid under my covers and texted Rachel, explaining what was going on. I did not get any sleep that night. I have no idea who he was or what his intentions were by chasing me, but I definitely learned my lesson, and that was the last night that I ever snuck out of my house. I used to always sneak out back when I was a teenager. I know it's stupid now because I have kids of my own and I would kill them if they ever did such a thing. But hindsight is 2020. I snuck out of my house one night to meet up with my boyfriend. He lived in the neighborhood behind me, which was separated by a bunch of woods and trees. I snuck out my back door and started making my way through the woods. As I was doing so, I started hearing twigs snapping near me. At first I thought it was an animal of some sort, like a deer or something, and just ignored it. As I was getting closer to the end of the trees, I heard the snapping of twigs again. This time, I looked around, and it was very dark in those woods, but the moon above did give me some light. A few yards back, I saw a man peeking out behind one of the trees. This startled me. Not really knowing what to do, I just called out, "Hey." Then I saw the man sprint away into the deeper part of the woods. I was young and stupid, and I should have been much more worried than I was at that point. But my boyfriend was waiting for me, and we did not have all night, so I just kept on going. When I finally reached the end of the woods, I saw my boyfriend. We made out and did all that teenage lovey-dovey shit. When we finished, we kissed goodbye and both headed back to our houses. I was going through the woods again and heard those same snapping twigs, but this time they were much closer. I tried to go a bit faster, not wanting to trip over a branch or a rock, when a hand grabbed my shoulder. I spun around and saw that man from earlier. He was ugly and looked homeless. He said, "Come here, sweetie," and tried to pull me in. I smacked his hand away and started sprinting for my house. I tripped a few times but didn't care. I made it to my back door and fished the keys out of my back pocket. From the woods, I saw that man running at me. I tried to put the key into the lock, but dropped it due to my terror. I looked behind me, and he was halfway across my backyard. I picked the key back up, put it into the hole, and went inside. I shut it quickly and relocked it. I looked out one of my kitchen windows and scanned my backyard. I didn't see the man anywhere. I sat in the kitchen trying to decompress and not make any noise for fear of also waking up my parents. I scanned the backyard one last time, didn't see the man, and went to my room. Against my better judgment, I continued to sneak out and meet my boyfriend, but carried pepper spray with me every time. But that was the only time something like that happened. I don't know who that man was or what his intentions were. Last year, I was sneaking out of my house to meet up with one of my friends. We would do this occasionally just for the thrill of it and to drink alcohol that she would get from her older sister. My parents were very heavy sleepers, and once they were out, it was pretty simple for me to sneak out of the house. Once I was out of the house, I FaceTimed my friend. We would do this to make what we were doing less scary and the walks to each other more enjoyable. We were close and just talking about what kind of alcohol that she was bringing when my friend said something alarming. She asked, "Who was that man behind you?" I turned around and noticed the man was actually walking a little bit close behind me. I hadn't noticed this because he must have been walking very softly and carefully. He seemed to be middle-aged, and he wore this hat low that pretty much covered his face. When I turned around to fully face him, he crossed the sidewalk and got into this beat-up red car. I did find it pretty creepy, but just figured he could have been anyone walking to their car, which wasn't a crime. I eventually met up with my friend and found a quiet spot in our neighborhood to take some shots. I only took one, but it definitely had me feeling sort of buzzed. We hung out for another half an hour, gossiped a bit, laughed at stupid jokes, and then we said goodbye. As I was walking back to my house, I noticed a pair of headlights from behind me. I turned around and saw that same beat-up red car. It was driving very slow, like it was following me. I was still buzzed at this point, but still sober enough to be scared. I decided to walk down a different road that didn't lead to my house, and noticed the car was still following close behind me. I was standing at a stop sign when the car suddenly put their high beams on. It was very blinding, and I heard them rev the engine. Terrified that this stalker man was going to kidnap me, I threw caution to the wind and full-on sprinted back to my house. I cut across yards and houses while that car kept following me. When I finally made it back into my house, I crept back into my room and looked out my bedroom window. That red car was literally parked right out front. Terrifying thoughts were racing through my mind. I watched as the man opened his car door and stood staring up at my window. He took his hat off his head and waved at me. I nearly cried. Then he got back into his car and slowly drove away. I stayed up all night praying that he would not return. He didn't, From then on, as much as I wanted to sneak back out, I couldn't. I was terrified that it would find me again, and I wouldn't be so lucky. For anyone else who sneaks out at night, just be careful and stay safe.